All right, hello. My name is Aaron. Oh, I got my speakers on. That's why that's happening. My name is Aaron. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about a book I've actually packed away. I'm getting ready to move, and I have my books all packed away, and it's so I could get it out, but it's just not practical. I'll put a screen grab thing of it here, but it is Mythos by Stephen Fry, and I'm not going to necessarily talk about the book. I'm actually going to talk about a singular story within the book, and the book is essentially kind of a reimagining of Greek myths and things like that. Well, not things like that. That's the entire. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up. I wrote this thing on it, and I want to talk a little bit about that. That's essentially the entire. It's just Stephen Fry's, not necessarily his interpretation, but his revamping of the Greek mythological stories, and it's really great. It's great for, I would say, people who don't necessarily want to dive like headfirst into very academic readings about Greek mythology. It has modern verbiage and things like that, and he just kind of paints them in ways that are modernly funny and tragic and happy and great, and also very tragic. A lot of the Greek myths are quite tragic and really touch upon kind of the worst parts of kind of the human emotional spectrum of human thought, and kind of what humans can do to other humans. And it actually does that in an interesting way, which is by proxy of the gods. The gods, it seems, are almost kind of polar extremes of the human emotional spectrum. Like if the human emotional spectrum is this big, then the god emotional spectrum is like this big, because they can be very nasty and vengeful and rude and inconsiderate and things like that. But they can also be quite gracious and all that. They're very bipolar. They don't spend a lot of time being calm. They have a lot of emotions going on, and so that's interesting. And the book is really good. It's almost laid out kind of like a textbook. It has a lot of sources and pictures and a lot of good information, and I really enjoyed going through it. I just got his second kind of installment in the series, if you call it that. It's called Heroes, and it's about I think kind of the less mythological, well, they're probably still mythological, but they're more based around humans and demigods and things like that. These individuals who are kind of coming down from Mount Olympus and living among the humans and the adventures that they had. But the thing I wanted to talk about today is a particular story within the book. It's a famous story. Everyone has probably heard a version of it or a snippet of it at some point in their lives. And that story is Pandora's Box. It's a very it's a classic story. And so a quick little overview of the story is essentially Prometheus, actually a Titan, who was displaced all the Titans were displaced as kind of the de facto leaders of Earth by the gods when Zeus overthrew his father Kronos, and so they were all kind of relegated to rather unpleasant positions. One of them in particular, Atlas, was literally tasked with holding up the entirety of the world for the rest of time, which, as you can imagine, would be grueling and exhausting. But yeah, Prometheus, he kind of separated himself from the Titans during what they called the Clash of the Titans, during the war between the Titans and the gods, and he eventually he became friends with Zeus, and they so he was kind of, I guess, pardoned from any excruciating manual labor or whatever strange weird jobs Zeus was giving these displaced Titans. And so one day Prometheus and Zeus, who are friends, are walking in a field or something, or they're wrestling or playing discus. I can't remember exactly what they're doing. Some strange Greek, not strange, but some Greek activity, or what they were walking. I can't remember, but they were talking to each other. And Zeus says, wouldn't it be interesting to have some little creatures that are like us, but not necessarily like us? And Prometheus is like, yeah, that'd be interesting. And so Prometheus crafts these beings, these kind of new forms out of what is earth, mud, and it is made mud by Zeus spitting on the ground. So you kind of have this this kind of very worldly element, which is mud, and then this kind of godly element, I guess, is Zeus's spit. I mean, it's came from a god, so it has to have some kind of weird magical powers. But anyway, he forms these forms that would become humans, and then Athena comes and breathes life into them to kind of breathe the breath of life into them, kind of this extra little, I don't know what you call it, little push to existence. Yeah, she kind of, that's how they become sentient, and so they become sentient. They're around. They're a little scared by the gods. Stephen Fry does an amazing job talking about or writing that in the book. It's very funny the way he describes it. And so you have these humans, and Zeus and Prometheus are kind of looking upon their creations, and I think both of them at that point are kind of taking very different paths when it comes to being like the creators and the watchers, and kind of stewards of this new what do you call it, species. They both kind of have a different view of the humans. Prometheus, who spent a lot of time forming them, is very much interested in kind of seeing how far they can go, pushing humans to be as great as they can. And Zeus is kind of the opposite. He's more interested in watching them kind of flail about on the Earth's surface, and he doesn't. The main contention here is Prometheus wants to give them fire, because fire is, kind of an important step in human evolution. It allowed us to cook and craft and all sorts of different things, and has disinfectant qualities. But and Zeus kind of protests pretty staunchly. He doesn't want that to happen because he's afraid that the humans might eventually become, if they are exposed to fire, they might eventually become powerful enough to displace the gods, which is an interesting callback, just as a little aside, to what Zeus had done to his own father. It's kind of this fear that he has instilled in himself, to be afraid of something that he created, because Zeus was created by Kronos, in part. It was also Rhea, I think, who was Kronos' consort, and Zeus displaced him. So I think Zeus kind of has this kind of innate fear that if he allows these creatures to become more powerful than him, they will displace him. And Prometheus doesn't necessarily feel that. He's probably not even worried about it, because as a Titan, he's not even really in any position of power. But he protests. They kind of get in an argument. Eventually, Prometheus is like, okay, whatever. And Zeus goes back to Mount Olympus, and then Prometheus climbs Mount Olympus and steals fire from the forge of Hephaestus, which is a son of Zeus, who's like a master craftsman, and he steals that fire and gives it back to the humans. And so Zeus eventually finds this out, because he's the god of gods, and he kind of knows everything that goes on the earth. And so Zeus finds this out, and he starts plotting some type of revenge against Prometheus, because he's very angry. And he actually exacts that revenge in two different ways. One kind of directly against Prometheus, and one kind of against Prometheus by proxy of the humans. And in that way, he's also kind of stunting the humans. So this is where Pandora's box comes in. So Prometheus has done this, and Prometheus has a brother named Epimetheus, who lives on the earth in a house. He's fairly human-like, and he tells Epimetheus, "I've stolen fire from the gods. They're probably angry, so don't accept any gifts from them, because it's probably a trick, and they're probably trying to get some revenge. So watch out for anything the gods might bring to you." And Epimetheus is like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. I don't need any gifts from the gods." But he doesn't really suspect what they're going to bring him. And so the gods, meanwhile, they craft the first human woman, because all the humans that Prometheus and Zeus had crafted were actually men. And so the gods are crafting a human woman named Pandora, and that their plan. Well, this Pandora is created, and she's given a box by Zeus, and it's a fairly inane gift, inane, yes, fairly inane gift. The only thing that's strange about it is the instruction that she is given about it, which is to not open the box. Zeus kind of commands her, don't ever open the box because I said so, because I'm the god of gods and you have to listen to me. And so she, with that information and that box, she's taken down to Earth and taken to Epimetheus and Athena and Hermes, I think, are the ones that take her, or maybe Aphrodite, I can't remember. But they take her there, present her to Epimetheus, who immediately is like, yeah, cool, I have a wife, whatever that is. This is the first human woman, which is probably why he's so kind of eager to accept it, because he's never seen a human woman. But I'm sure even these primordial male beings are interested in the side of a human woman, especially if they've never seen one. Kind of given the idea of the gods who are so horny and hedonistic, you can only expect that something that they created would, and something that is even a part of them, has that same kind of instinct, that same sexual and loving instinct. I don't necessarily know how to describe. They're interested in females, I would imagine. And so Epimetheus accepts, kind of betraying the promise that he made to Prometheus, because this woman was clearly brought by two gods, and but he doesn't care. They become married, Epimetheus and Pandora, and they start living together. And Pandora has her box. She's kind of curious about it. She's getting more and more curious about it. Eventually, she gets so curious about it that she buries it in like the backyard. It's kind of explained in the book, and like behind a shed or something, and leaves it there. Thinks that's gonna like put it out of her mind. Doesn't really work. And so one night, in kind of a fit of curiosity, she runs out, uncovers the box, and she opens it up, only to find that within the box are a number of human ailments, kind of the spirits of ailments that escape and start to wreak havoc on the world. Those ailments, and there are 5 of them, are disease, violence, want, misery, and deceit. Kind of 5 objectively terrible things that enter the sphere of humans and start to interact with the primordial species. And so this is kind of considered the end of the golden age of humanity. Before these things escaped, before these things started inflicting humans, humanity was considered to be kind of very peaceful and serene, and there weren't a lot of problems. And so Zeus, in kind of his trickster way, introduced these problems into the human race by proxy of Pandora. One of the very interesting things about the story that I actually wrote like a huge amount on, well, not a huge amount, but just a couple pages, 2, 3 or 4 pages, about is there's a 6th thing in the box. And the thing that is in the box, it's kind of left in the box because when Pandora opens it, she sees all these things escaping, and she's like, oh shit, and she quickly closes the box to seal in the 6th and final thing that can't escape, and that thing is hope, which I thought was a really interesting thing. And I kind of hyper focused on this, but it's kind of a really interesting thing to be left in the box, because in a box full of terrible things, one would not expect to find hope. I did not expect to see hope in the box alongside all these terrible ailments, these terrible aspects of humanity. And so I kind of thought about that a lot. I thought about why hope. I had 3 questions. It's good to kind of focus in these questions and try to find real good answers to them. So first question is, why would hope be in a box of the worst parts of humanity? And this kind of logically leads you to, well, hope is a bad part of humanity. So I started arguing in that direction, and I think there's something there, in that hope is not necessarily a utility. I wrote something down. It was, hope is the impetus for inspiration, which is kind of the impetus for doing, and then doing is the impetus for success. Hope is kind of is a building block, I suppose, on success, but it's definitely not. It's not something that by itself will lead you to success, and it's possibly not even integral to success. I don't think you need to hope for something for it to become true. You can almost like leapfrog hope to inspiration and go from there. Maybe I haven't sussed out that idea as much, but it kind of brought me to the idea of like of hope as a genuine utility when you're trying to do something. If it's just like a super bare bones example, if you're standing in your backyard and your grass needs mowed, if you look at the grass and go, man, I hope that grass gets mowed, it's not gonna. You're gonna have to get on a lawnmower or push a lawnmower or whatever to mow your grass. And so in that way, hope is not very utilitarian by itself. And so I think you could kind of make the argument that it's not a great thing. And I think sometimes hope can actually be kind of debilitating and paralyzing. I think some people, if you think, and this is a pretty macabre example, but if you take someone who is like terminally ill, who is known, it's known that they're going to die, and they have a certain time span, you can't really, to put it bluntly, there is no hope for you. You're going to die soon. And so hoping that you will survive at that point is just of no utility, because you're going to die. You're terminally ill. Unfortunately, you're going to die. And that's just the fact of the matter. So being hopeful about it is not in any way useful to you. You just kind of have to accept reality and move forward in the best way that you can to make your remaining time more meaningful. And then you can, from that macabre example, you can kind of expound it into everyone, because everyone's going to die, and you hoping that you're not, or maybe existing as if you're not, is not helpful. And in that way, I know that sounds kind of different, but in that way, I think you're actually it's almost like a naive hope, like an invisible hope. Like if you exist as if you're not going to die, you're hoping that you won't die. And in that way, you're just kind of not working towards anything meaningful. You're living a superfluous life. You're just kind of being a lazy wiener. And so, yeah, that's kind of the rabbit hole I went down there. And this another example to go to like some more modern, not necessarily modern, but modern compared to Greek mythology literature, is if you look at kind of the Divine Comedy, the first installment of that, Dante's Inferno. In the very beginnings of the book, when he's just entering hell, Virgil and Dante, they go through the gates of hell, and on the gates are inscribed, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." And especially as someone who's entering hell kind of their own volition, not necessarily as such, because as I understand the poem, and I don't really that much, he's kind of brought there in this kind of weird quest to rediscover his love for God, which I think in the modern era can kind of just be described as rediscover your love for humanity and life, and things like that. I don't necessarily want to go too far in that, but it does say, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter." And as someone whose job it is to get through hell, because if you're coming to hell of your own volition, because of the bad things that you did, you might see that and go, "Oh shit. Like, yep, I'm hopeless. This is a hopeless situation, and I'm afraid." But if you're coming in as somebody who needs to get through hell, such as Dante, you almost look at that as more of like a helpful instruction. You're like, okay, so there's no hope here. So hoping that I might get through is of no utility. I just have to get through. I just have to go through it, come out on the other side, which is Purgatorio or Purgatory, whatever. I'm not very familiar at all with the Divine Comedy. I have Dante's Inferno. I think I've read it. I literally can't even remember, because it's written in that old, I think it was originally written in Italian and then translated to like very old dead English. And it's a dense piece of literature, and it's really hard to get through. And it's like 400 pages of poetry, and poetry is actually really hard to follow when it doesn't stop. It's an epic poem. And so but I think that's a good example. And another more like pop culture example, Avatar: The Last Airbender. As a kid, that was my favorite cartoon. I still watch it sometimes when I'm really, really bored. And so, there's an episode when Aang and Katara and Sokka and all them need to get to Ba Sing Se. They have a couple hangers on, like a pregnant woman and a man. And they have to go through this pass. It's called the Serpent's Pass, which is known to be deadly. People who go through the pass don't survive. And it's actually a call back to Dante's Inferno, because they're going through, and there's a gate over the at the beginning of the pass, and it does say "Abandon all hope." I don't think it says "Ye who enter here." I think it just says "Abandon all hope." And Katara, in her classic way, is like, "Abandon hope." Ugh. But Aang, who is like super focused, pretty angry, and at this point, because Appa has been stolen, that's kind of why they need to get to Ba Sing Se so they can find him. He's very focused on what he needs to do. He says in a very sage way that hope is not useful in this moment. What's useful is pragmatic thinking and just moving forward. Like, we're never going to get to the other side if we just stand here and, one, hope, and two, kind of revel in the fear that is created by this abandon hope sign. It's of no utility. You just have to go forward. And so I think that's a school of thought. I don't necessarily know that it's right, but it's a story, and it's meant to make you think. And I thought about that a lot, a weird amount. Probably because I'm a fairly nihilistic individual, and I liked the idea of ripping open hope, because hope is, it's a naive emotion. What are you doing with your hope? Get out of here. So the second question. Hang on, I gotta go back to where the second question was. Oh, what does it mean that it was never let out of the box? Well, what does that mean for humanity? Do humans not experience hope? I think that was actually the third question. I might have done this in two different paragraphs, but they're essentially answering, I think, the same question. So if you take the kind of hope is bad theory, it's in following that, it would be beneficial that hope does not affect humans. And I think there's another idea here that what Aang said and what Dante needed to do is correct. Hope is not, since humans do not, hope is absent in the world, and so therefore humans are a very pragmatic species. And I think there's a lot of evidence for that. When you think of what a human even is, I heard someone the other day describe humans as tools. Humans aren't even tool makers. Like, we literally are tools because of our brain, and our hands, and just our ability to invent and our ingenuity. And that's kind of been our mode of existence since the dawn of time, because we don't necessarily have the defensive and offensive mechanisms that our more animalistic counterparts have. We don't have a huge amount of strength. We're fairly strong, but we don't have, like gorilla strength or anything like that. We don't have claws. We have fingernails, which fall out fairly easily, and we can't run that fast. We're bipedal, so a huge amount of things can run way faster than we can. We're not the best climbers. We can climb, but a bunch of things can climb faster than we can. But we do have like massive brains, and so that's kind of, and that goes to show that it's kind of our pragmatism that is important. And I think they might even be trying to allude to that with this story, that hope isn't really going to get you anywhere. And I actually don't like saying that, even though I'm a fairly nihilistic individual. I don't like saying that hope isn't going to get you anywhere, because I think you can. I think hope has utility. I don't know. I'm not too in touch with my hopeful self. I've never been a very faithful individual. Faithful in the sense that I don't necessarily have faith, because that word has different connotations, and we don't need to go into that. But hope. I've never been a super hopeful individual, and that the only reason I know that is because I just don't really know what utility hope has. I prefer the pragmatic, but I think you can put humans into the category of pragmatic, and I think that's kind of that's an idea that you can get from this idea of hope still being in the box. Because if hope escaped the box and humans experienced hope, where would our pragmatism be then? What would humanity look like? And that's a question I can't answer. And to the extent that I can answer any of these questions, I'm just thinking about them. So yeah, humans can change the world. I don't think necessarily because of hope, but because of pragmatism. Hope might play a role in there somewhere. A more hopeful individual might be able to answer that question. So we have a hopeless human race. Not necessarily hopeless human race, but a human race without hope. But it's been deduced that that's a good thing, at least in my mind. And so is this kind of true? Is this in the macro sense? Do we experience hope? And I tried to answer this as a not very hopeful person. But I truly, I think obviously not. I think a lot of people experience hope, and I think they experience it in ways that are helpful. Because I think if you kind of combine hope and pragmatism, like I said earlier, hope is the impetus for inspiration. Inspiration is the impetus for doing, and then doing is the impetus for success. I think hope is kind of a balance. It's kind of like I love spectrums. Hope is kind of the is on the one pole of the spectrum, and then like success is over here, and you have to find a way to put yourself, I think, right here so that you're balanced in your pragmatism and your hope. You're kind of a wish, because you can't, if you're always just like if you're always hopeful, you're never gonna get anything done. If you're always successful, if you're successful, you might become rigid. And I think you kind of need that hope balance to constantly keep being inspired. If you kind of need your, not your success to be renewed, but you need your inspiration to be renewed so that you can find new forms of success, because you don't want to become rigid in your success, because then you're kind of unadaptable. That's another thing that humans are very much, is adaptable. A person I'm a huge fan of, Brett Weinstein, and his wife Heather Heying, I think, wrote an entire book about how humans are clearly the most adaptable species. I don't think anyone was debating that, but just how adaptable we are, and they go into that a little bit. And I think that's it's important thing to understand, and a good book. Hopefully, actually, I don't know if it's a good book. I haven't read it, but I will at some point once I get done with all these other freaking books. And so, given that I basically just destroyed everything I just said with that past statement, that hope actually does exist and plays a role in humanity, what's the point of the story? And I think the actual point of the story, as a lot of Greek myths is to just point out how shitty humans can be sometimes, and gods too. But gods are kind of humans by proxy. I think they're kind of the elevation of human emotion and thought. Kind of human emotion and thought, like, squared, or maybe to the 10th power. They're very emotional and not very thoughtful at times. Yeah, I think it's to highlight human greed, because by all intents and purposes, there's no need for like any of this to happen. It's strange. Well, to break it down, you kind of have Epimetheus's greed of lust. They bring in Pandora, and he's promised not to take any gifts, but he just does. He doesn't even think about it. He's just like, yep, cool, I got a wife. And then Pandora kind of has this greed of curiosity. She can't really control her curiosity, and she's been commanded by the god of gods, hey, don't open that box. And it's not even really curiosity. It's almost like mandated mystery. Because, I don't know, you're kind of curious about things that you don't know. You're curious about things that you don't know a lot about. And I guess this box kind of falls into that category, which is why she is curious about it. But she's curious in the way that is kind of doubled by the fact that she was told not to open it. So I think it makes it doubly hard to resist your curiosity. It's kind of like if somebody puts you in a room with like a gilded chest, and you're the only one in the room, and they're like, hey, don't open that chest, by the way. You're like, oh man, I really want to open that chest. At least I would. I would be. It, it's a, there's got to be something good inside it. It's literally look expensive on the outside, and it's not even necessarily just to like take what's on the. It's just like I gotta know what's in there. Like it's you don't make a box that nice to put something shitty in it, and so she kind of has this greed of curiosity. But I think the main vector of greed here is Zeus, who can't really whose greed for revenge destroys the entirety of human. Oh, that's not true. It doesn't destroy the entirety of human prosperousness. It just kind of adds this extra obstacle, which is all these terrible things. And so yeah, I think the story is meant to outline that. And greed is really the root of one of the roots of all evil. If there are multiple, I think if you had to put something if you had to pick the biggest root, there might be multiple like kind of scattered tinier roots, but I think the biggest root of all evil is human greed. A lot of people will say money is the root of all evil. I think that's kind of ridiculous. I think the greed for money is what they mean to say. People who live to make money and nothing else, that might be considered a form of evil, but it's not. Money is not the problem there. It's the person's greed that's the problem. And so I think that's about that. I was super interested in the story. The hope thing is really what interested me in it in the first place, and I kind of had to follow that path all the way down just to come to the greed thing. And it's also a story of the Zeus thing is interesting. The fact that Zeus is so reluctant to see the humans succeed. They're not necessarily reluctant, but he doesn't want to see them succeed. The fact that Zeus is such a bastard is interesting. And the fact that Prometheus, you get this kind of dichotomy of fatherhood almost. And it kind of directly connects to Zeus's past, who's only ever experienced tyrannical fatherhood, and that's kind of, I think, what he defaults to. But then you have Prometheus, who is, by all standards of measure, is a pretty loving father figure. He's teaching humans how to do things. He's bringing them fire. He wants to see them succeed, and he wants them to do well, and kind of build something for themselves. And maybe that kind of comes from his own displacement as like a leader, because he experienced kind of greatness, and he was never a leader, but he was a titan. He was kind of a member of this elite class of people who literally ruled the world, gods who literally ruled the world, titans. The separation is a little confusing for me. I don't necessarily understand what the difference is, but he kind of experienced this, then he kind of fell from grace, and that might have humbled him a little bit to kind of his own thoughts about greatness and what it means. And Zeus has kind of never been humbled. His head is exploded with the majesty of his own greatness. That wasn't a very good sentence, but it's all this is just it's fun to think about. I enjoy thinking about it, and it's everywhere in Greek mythology. Greek mythology is really interesting. It's kind of amazing how wise they were. They're kind of these first primordial. This is kind of a primordial religious structure, and already it's addressing these really important and deep problems of philosophy and things like that. And I think it's also interesting that Greek, of all the religious structures, it makes sense to me, but Greek is kind of the most human. It's not necessarily idealistic, maybe in like the physical sense, because gods are very big and strong and beautiful, but in the emotional sense and just like general maturity, gods are capricious. I love that word. It's kind of a word I learned from, well, it was in the picture of Dorian Gray as well. But it was in this book a lot, and it's a great word to describe. It's just kind of it's just like unpredictability. It's like it's basically being emotionally unstable, and that's a great way to explain the gods. They are not predictable at all, and they do a lot of questionable things. And but the Greek mythological kind of religious structure is very human in its nature. It's addressing very human problems, and it's interesting in that way. You look at other religious structures, and they have these ideals, and usually an ideal that exists in the form of an actual god. But to say that the Greek gods were ideals is, by the standard of today, just seems incorrect, because they were such bastards. Like, they did a lot of shitty things. And so yeah, I thought that was a really interesting thing to focus on in Greek mythology. I really enjoyed that book and the stories within. There's a lot of good stories in Greek mythology that deal with a lot of really, like I already said, really important and interesting topics. But that's all I'm going to say about that today. It's Sunday, so everybody have a good new week, and I'll catch you later.